In the small, sunburned village of Mbingwa, people didn't speak of Keto unless it was to pity or mock him. He lived alone in a mud-walled hut at the edge of the forest, with no livestock, no family, and barely enough food to last a week. His clothes were worn to threads, and his sandals had holes that let stones bite into his feet. Keto once had dreams of becoming a teacher, of marrying a kind woman, of building a small home filled with laughter. But life, harsh and unkind, had crushed those dreams beneath the weight of poverty. He woke up each morning to the sound of birds singing over the fields he did not own, and he went to sleep each night hungry, with the wind whispering through the cracks in his roof. The villagers called him Keto Wavambai, Keto of dust, because everywhere he went, dust followed. No one remembered his full name, not even himself. Poverty had stripped him of everything, including his identity. On market days, Keto walked from house to house offering to carry loads for a few coins. He would lift baskets of tomatoes, cassava, and maize for old women who barely acknowledged him. Children pointed and laughed, calling him names like beggar man or empty hands. One day, as he passed by a group of girls laughing beside the sugarcane stall, he saw Akin, the one woman he had once loved in secret. He gathered courage and approached her. Akin, I know I have little now, but I have a heart that beats for you. She looked him up and down and laughed bitterly. Love. You can't feed love with empty pockets, Keto. Go and marry your hunger. Her words sliced through him deeper than any blade. That night, Keto sat under the stars, his chest hollow with shame. He wanted to scream, but only silence answered him. Even the moon seemed to turn its face away. Keto remembered the days when he had parents, when laughter lived in his home. His father, a fisherman, had died when his boat capsized during a storm. His mother had wasted away slowly after, coughing blood into an old handkerchief, refusing to let go of his hand until her final breath. He was only 16 then. Too young to be a man, too old to be a child. The world didn't wait for him to grieve. He had to fight to live, to eat, to exist. But he never truly healed from that loss, it festered quietly like an infected wound. Now, as a grown man with nothing to his name, Keto wondered if he was cursed. Every job he tried failed. Every seed he planted dried up. Every woman he loved looked past him, as if he were made of mist and misery. A poor single man rejected by women and beaten down by poverty. Rain came early that year, hard and unrelenting. Keto's roof, patched with torn sacks and palm leaves, began to leak. Each night he lay curled in the corner of his hut, trying to avoid the dripping water, covering himself with a damp blanket full of holes. His neighbors, warm in their iron sheet homes, didn't notice or didn't care. One boy from the village shouted through the rain, "Keto, don't drown in your own house," followed by mocking laughter. Keto didn't respond. He stared at the ceiling, water falling like tears from the heavens, and whispered to himself, "Even the sky pities me." One morning, Keto helped an elderly woman lift a sack of charcoal. Her granddaughter, Awinja, stood nearby wearing bright red beads and eyes full of scorn. When the sack was finally on the cart, there were days Keto ate only wild fruits and drank muddy river water. On one such day, he returned to his hut and found his only cooking bowl broken, shattered by a snake that had slithered through and knocked it from the shelf. He dropped to his knees, holding the pieces like a grieving father. That bowl had belonged to his mother. It had been with him through hunger, sickness, and pain. Now, even it had left him. That night, he sat beside a small fire with no pot, no meal, and no hope. He looked up at the stars and asked, "What sin did I commit by being born poor?" One day, he received a folded card slipped beneath his door. It was an invitation to Akin's wedding, the same woman who once laughed in his face. She was marrying the son of a rich trader from across the river. He stood at the edge of the village as the wedding procession passed. Akin wore golden fabric and laughed without a care in the world. She glanced at Keto for a moment, her eyes cold and dismissive. Keto turned away before his tears could fall. "Let her be happy," he whispered. "Maybe the gods have chosen joy for her and pain for me." One evening, a villager falsely accused Keto of stealing a missing goat. "He's always hungry," the man said. "Who else would take it?" The chief summoned Keto to the village square for questioning. Despite his protest, people stared at him with suspicion. Children threw stones. "Thief!" someone shouted. The goat was later found in a nearby bush, unharmed and not stolen at all. But no one apologized. No one said sorry. Keto walked home with bruises on his arms and shame heavy in his chest. Even the truth cannot cleanse the name of the poor, he thought. Every week, Keto went to the roadside hoping for a letter, any sign that life would change. He had once applied to work as a farmhand in a distant county. The farmer had promised to write. Weeks became months. No letter came. Only dust and wind visited him. One afternoon, the village postman, tired of seeing him wait, said, "Keto, no one writes to people like you. Even hope avoids the poor." Keto nodded and walked away. His feet dragged through the dirt, his spirit a shadow. But he still looked back, one last time, just in case the letter had been late. Keto lit his fire one cold night, but it gave no warmth. The wood was wet, the flame weak. He sat near it anyway, holding out his hands like a man clinging to a memory. He remembered when his mother used to warm his feet before bed, telling stories of strong men who rose from nothing. They were not born poor, she'd say. They were born with a war inside them. That night, Keto decided he would no longer wait for kindness. If the world would not offer him fire, he would become the spark himself, even if he had to burn slowly. Keto found an old mirror discarded at the edge of the market, cracked in the center, its frame rusted. He brought it home and placed it in his hut. For the first time in months, he looked at his own reflection. His face was thin, with hollow cheeks and tired eyes. He barely recognized himself. "Is this who I've become?" he whispered. The mirror didn't lie, it showed him not just his appearance, but his broken spirit. Still, he kept the mirror. "If I must be reminded of my pain," he told himself, "then let it stare me down each morning until I learn to rise from it." One scorching afternoon, Keto begged the shopkeeper for a cup of water. The man, without even looking at him, handed him a cup of salt water as a cruel joke. Keto drank it anyway, though it burned his throat and made him sick. "Let it sting," he murmured, wiping his mouth. "If they want to poison me with humiliation, I'll swallow it and keep walking." Later that night, he vomited beside his hut and lay cowed on the dirt. Yet still, he got up the next day, because even the humiliated deserve morning light. Keto dreamed that he was walking through the village wearing polished black shoes. People nodded at him with respect. Children ran beside him. Women smiled. He woke up with joy in his chest, only to find his bare, cracked feet aching from the day before. There were no shoes. Just the same sandals with holes, held together by string. He wept. Not because of the dream, but because he still wanted to believe it could come true. Maybe dreams are the only luxury a poor man can afford, he thought bitterly. One night, Keto passed by a gathering of young men drinking and laughing near the chief's compound. As he walked by, they called out, mocking him. "Keto, will you marry your shadow? It's the only thing staying beside you." Their laughter echoed behind him as he kept walking, head down. But that night, Keto stood outside his hut and laughed softly to himself. "They drink to forget. I survived to remember." He had nothing to numb his pain, only the resolve to carry it with pride. While fetching water from the river, Keto met a girl named Malaika. She wasn't like the others, her eyes were kind, her voice soft. She asked his name, and he hesitated before answering. She didn't flinch. She smiled. They spoke for hours. She told him about her love for stories and her dream of owning a bookstore. For a moment, Kato forgot his hunger, his shame, his pain. But the next day, she came with another man, wealthy, confident, loud. She walked past Kato as if they'd never met. He stood still, the river water slushing in his calabash, his heart flooded with silence. The chief held a public gathering and offered small jobs to young men in the village. Kato lined up early, hopeful. But when it was his turn, the chief looked at his torn shirt and laughed. You'd collapse carrying firewood. People laughed. One woman said, he should be given a mirror, not a machete. Kato said nothing. He turned and walked away. But every step felt like a hammer against his ribs. That day, shame followed him home like a shadow, whispering that maybe they were right. He survived for 3 days on breadcrumbs left behind the bakery. Once, he found a discarded chicken bone and boiled it to make soup. The water turned grey, the taste bitter, but he sipped it like royalty. He told himself stories while eating, pretending he was in a palace, that the soup was goat stew, and the bread was fresh and warm. His imagination was his last shield against the madness that poverty breeds. If they won't feed me with dignity, he said, I'll dine with dreams. During the village's annual festival of lights, lanterns lit up the night. Dancers paraded in bright colors, music filled the air, and lovers walked hand in hand. Kato watched from the shadows. He had nothing to wear, no one to dance with, no coin to buy roasted meat. Still, he lit a small candle inside his hut and watched it burn. They celebrate joy, he whispered. But I celebrate survival. Even alone, even forgotten, he chose to honor his breath, his heartbeat, his persistence. A strong wind came one night and uprooted a tree near Kato's hut. It fell hard, crushing one side of his home and nearly taking his life. People came the next day, not to help, but to gawk. Even the trees want him gone, someone joked. Kato picked up what remained, using fallen branches to rebuild his walls. His hands bled. His back ached. But he did not stop. You can bury a seed, he muttered, but it still rises. One rainy evening, a letter arrived. Soaked, smeared, but still legible. It was from a man named Baraka, who had once worked with Kato's father. He had heard of Kato's suffering and offered him a small job clearing land in the town of Kelemba. Kato clutched the letter to his chest. It wasn't riches. It wasn't love. But it was a door. And for a man who had slept beside walls of silence for years, a door was a miracle. He packed what little he had, wrapped the letter in dry cloth, and whispered, "Let this be the beginning of my rising." With only a satchel, a dry crust of ugali, and the soaked letter, Kato set off for Kelemba. The journey was long, dust rising beneath his feet, hunger clawing at his belly. He walked for 3 days, sleeping under trees and surviving on river water and wild berries. His feet blistered and bled. Each time he thought of turning back, he reminded himself, there's nothing to return to. But ahead, there might be something. On the 4th day, the roofs of Kelemba glimmered ahead like the edge of a dream. His legs nearly gave out, but his spirit carried him forward. Baraka, a tall, stern man with tired eyes, greeted Kato at the edge of a half-cleared farm. "You're thinner than your father," he said. "But your eyes, they're the same. Hungry." Kato was given a machete and hoe. No promises, no kindness. Just work. He dug, slashed, lifted, and sweated. The sun showed him no mercy. His palms tore open. But every stroke of the hoe against the earth felt like a drumbeat. You're not useless. You're not forgotten. You're not done. That night, he slept in a shed, but his heart finally rested without shame. Baraka's wife, Mama Rehima, called Kato into the kitchen one evening. "You've worked hard," she said. "Eat." She handed him a steaming plate of beans and rice. It had been months since Keto had eaten a hot, full meal served with dignity. Tears welled up as he took the first bite. He ate slowly, savoring each spoonful as if it were a gift from heaven. Mama Rehema smiled gently. You remind me of my brother. Life bruised him too. But he stood. Keto looked at the empty plate and whispered, I will stand too. Chapter 24, Echoes of his father. Baraka finally told him stories of his father, a man brave, quiet, and proud. He died trying to feed his family, Baraka said. But he never begged. Never broke. Keto felt a surge of emotion. For the first time in years, he felt connected to something honorable. His father wasn't just a memory of poverty, he was a man who fought for dignity. I want to honor him, Keto said. Baraka nodded. Then start by rebuilding yourself. After weeks of backbreaking work, Baraka handed Keto an envelope with a small payment. It wasn't much, but it was his first honest earnings in years. He held it like a sacred object. He walked into the town market and bought a new shirt, plain but clean. When he wore it, people didn't stare with disgust. He stood a little taller that day. I have what, he told his reflection in a shop window. I have value, even if no one saw it before. While helping fix a fence near the carpenter's workshop, Keto met a girl named Sifa. She was gentle but firm, with hands calloused from woodworking. She spoke to him like an equal, not with pity, not with mockery. They shared short conversations about trees, music, and broken things. Sifa once said, some people think poverty is a disease. But sometimes, it's just a test of how deeply someone can love themselves without applause. Keto left those talks feeling something he hadn't in years seen. One night, Baraka handed Keto an old notebook. You used to write, didn't you? I found this in your father's trunk. Keto opened it and saw faded poems he wrote as a child, before the grief, before the shame. That night, by candlelight, he picked up a pen and wrote again. Pain made me hollow, but also made me deep. Each word felt like stitching together a torn soul. He kept writing about hunger and survival. His wounds became ink. Keto saw Akin again, now in Kilemba, visiting her husband's relatives. She was dressed richly, her laughter quieter, her eyes no longer cruel. He walked past her at the market. This time, she looked at him, really looked, and didn't laugh. In fact, she looked surprised. He didn't stop or speak. He had no revenge to offer. Only growth. Only proof. That night, he smiled to himself and said, let them witness my rising, not my revenge. While sweeping the compound, Keto found a leather wallet stuffed with notes, dropped by a rich trader passing through town. He could have taken it and disappeared. Instead, he returned it. The trader looked shocked. A poor man with integrity. That's rare. Keto smiled. Poverty took my food, not my name. The trader handed him a reward. Come see me if you ever want to learn business, he said. That moment planted a seed Keto never expected, opportunity. Keto sat beneath a mango tree and wrote his first letter back to the village. He didn't write to anyone in particular. He just needed to send a message into the world. He wrote, I am not who I was. Pain did not kill me. Rejection did not erase me. I may still be poor, but I now walk in the direction of purpose. One day, you will hear of me, not as Keto the beggar, but Keto the man who stood. He sealed it and gave it to a traveling merchant. That letter carried more than words, it carried a declaration of life. The wealthy trader Keto had helped returned weeks later and offered him an opportunity to work at his small shop in the next town. You'll start by cleaning and watching, he said. But learn with your eyes. Keto accepted without hesitation. The shop bustled with customers. He swept, stacked goods, studied transactions, and observed how prices were negotiated. Every evening, he took mental notes. He was invisible to most customers, but not to himself. "I am more than a broom," he whispered each day. "I am becoming something." Sifa visited him one afternoon, carrying a carved wooden gift, his name etched in smooth Swahili lettering, Keto Mjasiriamali, Keto the entrepreneur. "You are becoming who you were always meant to be," she said. He stared at the gift for a long time. No one had ever given him something with his name proudly carved into it. Not since his mother. He clutched the carving and said quietly, "I am trying." Sifa replied, "And that's how men rise, from the trying." Despite his growth, Keto still heard whispers behind his back. Some said he had gotten lucky. Others claimed he'd eventually return to his old place, hungry and barefoot. Rejection, like a ghost, tried to creep back into his mind. But he fought back. "Their words built my pain," he reminded himself, "but my pain built my foundation." He stopped explaining himself to doubters. He let his progress be his only response. After months of loyal service, the trader handed Keto the keys one morning. "You'll open and close today." "I'm away," he said. "Don't disappoint me." Keto ran the shop with precision. By evening, he had not only sold every item correctly but recorded every sale in a ledger. When the trader returned, he simply nodded and said, "You're ready for more." That night, Keto stared at the keys on his mat and wept. He had once begged for water, now he held the key to a business. With his savings, Keto bought a second-hand suit from the market. It wasn't new, but it fit well. When he wore it, people looked at him differently, not with pity, but curiosity. He passed a group of women, and one of them stared. It was Awinja, the girl who once threw a mango at him. She opened her mouth, but he simply nodded politely and walked past. He didn't need revenge. His life was already speaking louder than her laughter ever had. One week, the shop lost several deliveries due to flooding. Sales dropped. Profits dried. The trader was forced to close temporarily. Keto found himself hungry again, counting coins, eating sparingly. The taste of poverty returned. But this time, it didn't break him. "I've been here before," he said, staring at the cracked floor of his small room. "But I'm not the same man anymore." He tightened his belt and sharpened his mind. Keto used his downtime to create a plan. A small mobile kiosk that sold essentials, salt, soap, sugar, in rural areas. He scribbled prices, routes, and supplies in his notebook. When the trader returned, Keto showed him the idea. The trader leaned back and said, "This is smart." He gave Keto a small loan. "Prove yourself," he said. "If it works, we'll talk partnership." Keto was stunned. Someone had finally bet on his mind, not just his muscles. With a borrowed bicycle and a wooden box mounted at the back, Keto began his mobile business. He rode to nearby villages, selling goods at fair prices. The people loved him not because he was flashy, but because he was kind, honest, and dependable. He called the kiosk Mzizi, meaning root, because, as he told one customer, every tree, no matter how tall, started from deep roots. During one of his stops, an old woman told him, "You remind me of my son. He died poor and ashamed. You give people like us hope." Her words echoed in Keto's heart. He realized he wasn't just selling sugar and soap, he was restoring dignity in places forgotten by the world. "I will never forget where I came from," he told himself that night. "Even if I rise, I must never forget the cold hands of hunger." Months passed, and the business grew. He added more bicycles, hired 2 young men who were once beggars like he had been. He paid them fairly, fed them daily, and taught them everything he knew. "You are not servants," he said. "You are seeds." One evening, As they shared ugali and beans under a tree, one of them asked, "Keto, how did you survive all that pain?" Keto looked up at the stars and replied, "I didn't survive it. I used it to rise." One morning, Keto received a formal letter from the mayor of Kolemba. He had been nominated for a local entrepreneurship award for uplifting the poor and building a mobile business from nothing. At first, Keto thought it was a joke. He reread the letter a dozen times. "From dust to honor," he whispered. He didn't care about applause. What moved him most was the sentence at the bottom, "Your story has inspired many." Chapter 42, A Room of Suits. At the award ceremony, Keto stood among well-dressed men and women, CEOs and investors. Some looked at him strangely. His suit was clean but modest. But when Keto told his story on stage, the room fell silent. He spoke of cracked feet, rejection, salt water, and survival. "I stand here not because I was lucky," he said, "but because pain became my compass." When he finished, the room stood and clapped, not out of politeness, but out of awe. Word of Keto's award reached his home village of Mbingwa. The same people who once mocked him now spoke his name with reverence. "Isn't that Keto Wavambai?" they asked, stunned. "The boy we laughed at." He returned to the village quietly one afternoon. Children gathered around him, whispering. Elders invited him to sit and speak. When someone asked how he changed his life, he simply smiled and said, "I never changed. I just found my purpose buried under the dust you threw at me." A king stood in the crowd during Keto's return. She had divorced, they said. Life hadn't been as kind to her as she once imagined. She approached him slowly. "Keto," she began. But he gently stopped her with a kind smile. "You owe me nothing. I'm grateful. Your no made room for my yes." She lowered her head, speechless. Keto returned to the tree near the river, the one where he first met Malaika. He sat on the old bench, now cracked with age. It was here that he had first felt sin. It was here that rejection had nearly broken him. And now, he sat as a man who had built something from nothing. He closed his eyes, letting the breeze wash over him. "You don't have to be loud to make history," he whispered. "You just have to endure." Despite his success, Keto still had nights where pain crept back like a shadow. One night, he looked at his hands, scarred, calloused, and worn, and wept. Not from sadness, but from release. The tears carried years of buried screams, silent rejections, and cold nights. That night, he forgave the world. But more importantly, he forgave himself for doubting that he was ever worthy of love and respect. Keto proposed to Sifa beneath a mango tree. He carved the question into wood, "Will you build with me?" She didn't hesitate. "I've watched you rise from ashes. You don't need gold. You are gold." Their wedding was small but rich with emotion. No loud music, no diamonds, just love, family, and silent tears of joy. Keto used his profits to build a school in Mbingwa for children from poor families. He called it Shule Majivu, School of Ashes. Because even from ashes, he told the children, a phoenix can rise. He spoke to them often, sharing his story not as a hero, but as a reminder, poverty is not identity. It's a season. At a public gathering, an elder stood and said, "We mocked this man. We stripped him of his name. But today, let us say it fully and with pride." Keto stood, and the entire village chanted his name, Keto Baroka Monzia. For the first time in decades, his full name echoed in the wind, not in shame, but in honor. Years later, Keto sat on his porch, surrounded by children, his own and those he mentored. His eyes were softer now, his heart gentler. He told them, "I was once the man no one wanted. Rejected. Forgotten. But I used every insult as a seed. And this life, this joy, is the tree that grew. He looked to the horizon, the dust rising as a young boy chased a dream. And he whispered, "Let the world laugh at your ashes. Just make sure you live long enough to wear your crown."